Hello and welcome to my review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So, as I explained in my WandaVision review, I am a huge Marvel fan, but I only started reviewing TV shows and movies recently. So unless you regularly attend my live streams, you probably wouldn't know that I'm a really big Marvel fan. But anyways, Falcon and the Winter Soldier is a Marvel punch-out for the ages. It is very much an action-adventure show. And while there are some dramatic elements to the show, the choreographed fight sequences, stunts, and set pieces are definitely the focus. So I would definitely recommend this show to you if, say, you thought WandaVision was a little too slow and lacked action, or if you are someone who is a fan of the more cinematic battle scenes found in the typical Marvel movies. If you're someone who hopped onto the Marvel Cinematic Universe with WandaVision, because particularly in the earlier episodes, they were heavier on the comedy, the pace is a lot slower, it's more oriented around the drama and mystery, you may not enjoy Falcon and the Winter Soldier as much. While certainly none of the actors in Falcon and the Winter Soldier turn in a bad performance, because of the action-oriented and faster-paced nature of Falcon and the Winter Soldier comparative to WandaVision, the actors don't get as much time relative to WandaVision to slow down and have more dramatic moments. So Falcon and the Winter Soldier continues in the aftermath of Avengers Endgame, in that not only has Steve Rogers passed over the mantle of Captain America to Sam Wilson, the Falcon, but has also, due to time travel shenanigans, if you watched Avengers Endgame, you know I'm not going to explain it here, has aged into an elderly man, and as we find out in the beginning of the series, has passed away. Now, this is pure speculation on my part, but I think Steve Rogers doesn't show up at all in this series because Chris Evans just wanted out. He's been pretty public for quite some time how he hates getting into shape for the Captain America role and how he has been thinking about transitioning from acting into directing for some time. But I was honestly really surprised they didn't even get him back for a cameo as Old Cap. But on the other hand, it kind of makes sense. If one of the main points of the show is to transition the Captain America title from Steve Rogers to Sam Wilson, then I could see how it would somehow diminish Sam's story by having Steve Rogers come back, especially since Steve Rogers already explicitly had his handing over of the shield moment with Sam Wilson in Endgame. So despite the fact that Steve explicitly wanted Sam to have the shield at the end of Avengers Endgame, the beginning of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam hands over the shield to the US government in order for the shield to be decommissioned. But the US government betrays Sam and goes back on their promise of decommissioning the shield in order to give the shield to John Walker, the new Captain America. And this begins the general theme in Falcon and the Winter Soldier of American government and institutions betraying specifically Black people. While Captain America movies in the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe have always had something of an anti-government slant, particularly in the former Captain America and the Winter Soldier. If you've watched all the way to the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you know why that's funny. But in the Captain America and Winter Soldier movie, the anti-government slant was more about government overreach and government corruption in general. The themes were somewhat hand-waved away by the fact that it was really Hydra who was behind this government corruption all along, so that any criticism of the government in that movie could be sideswept by the fact that, oh, but it's not really the government, it's really the bad guys, it's really Hydra. And so even though Hydra does play a very minor role in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the show very much makes an effort to emphasize the fact that it is in fact the American government that is betraying Black Americans. And this betrayal ranges from basic daily microaggressions to atrocities that put the US government almost on the same level as Hydra. So this makes Sam's refusal to the call of action at the beginning of the show very understandable. And it's what contributes to the conflict between Sam and Bucky, because as a white man, Bucky cannot completely grasp what Sam is going through with this dilemma, especially at the beginning. I'll go more into Sam and and Bucky's relationship in the character section, but I believe one of the things that helps Sam and Bucky deepen their friendship is Bucky spending more time with Sam and understanding his perspective, while at the same time learning to accept the fact that he will never 100% completely understand Sam's experience. So after Sam gives up the shield, Sam and Bucky must reluctantly team up together to fight the Flag Smashers, who very much think of themselves as the daring rebels fighting for the little guy, while the government has labeled them as dangerous terrorists. As a villain, the Flag Smashers are kind of just there for me. Because the main focus is on Bucky and Sam as characters, the Flag Smashers kind of have the Marvel villain problem of taking a seat to the character drama between the protagonists. I do like the actress who plays Carly though. She was also the rebel leader in Solo, so this role kind of does make sense for her. Speaking of Marvel villains that kind of fall into the background, in order to take down the Flag Smashers, Sam and Bucky have to recruit Baron Zemo. For those who don't remember, almost myself included, it took me a while to remember which film he was from. He was the main antagonist in Captain America Civil War. I say the main antagonist, but that was another movie where the primary conflict was between two of the protagonists, and so the antagonist really kind of falls into the background and really only serves to push the conflict between these two protagonists. So in very typical villain fashion, Zemo just wants to completely kill the Flag Smashers, but Sam disagrees. He admits he somewhat agrees with their philosophy and really just wants to talk them out of violence. While I don't think the story surrounding the Flag Smashers had the sort of political statement I think a lot of people were expecting at the beginning of the show, from a story standpoint, the story arc surrounding the Flag Smashers shows how Sam is worthy of the title of Captain America in that he shares the same optimism and hope for peace that Steve Rogers did. The trio also cross paths and are assisted by Sharon Carter, also known as Agent 13, although I'm not sure if they've ever officially called her Agent 13 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who has been in hiding in Madripoor after the events of Captain America Civil War, after she is labeled a criminal by the American government. Sharon Carter is actually a really interesting foil to Sam, in that she was an optimistic figure in both Winter Soldier and Civil War, similar to Sam. However, after the American government betrayed her in Civil War, we see in the events of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it has caused her to begin acting in ways in which before the betrayal she would not have acted. Now, these three, sometimes four, team up to not necessarily defeat the Flag Smashers. It's a very interesting group dynamic because collectively they all have the same vague goal, but their ideas of how they should go about it and the conclusions that defeating the Flag Smashers should come to are all very different among pretty much all four of them. Maybe with the exception of Sam and Bucky, because even though Bucky definitely voices some of his displeasure against some of Sam's choices, he still backs up Sam's decision and is really kind of like a part of the team, a part of that duo. But this kind of main team, despite their differences, are also at odds with John Walker and Lamar Hoskins, which is interesting that John Walker's methods are actually a little more in line with Baron Zemo's, especially after he takes the super soldier serum. John Walker is clearly not afraid to just kill anybody who gets in his way. But yes, that's kind of the main story. I don't know, it's so hard to talk about the story without talking about the characters, as you could probably tell. Because I've talked about Sam so much in the beginning part, I think I'll start the character section off with Bucky. Bucky's arc in Falcon and the Winter Soldier is making amends for his actions as the Winter Soldier. Even though the show is called Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Bucky is very much trying to distance himself from his former identity as the Winter Soldier and is trying to right the wrongs of the past, both in his words and in his actions. Although actions seem to come a lot easier to him than words, because as it's shown very early on in the series, he has no problem like dispatching people who are associated with the Winter Soldier program, but also he has trouble confessing to a grandfather of a parental figure of a former civilian that he killed as the Winter Soldier. But Bucky's secondary conflict kind of underneath that is As his therapist says, he needs to make friends. He needs to have a life outside of crime fighting. As much as the Marvel movies love to focus on crime fighting, there is a life outside of crime fighting. And I really loved the friendship between Sam and Bucky. Honestly, for me, it carried the show. Like, my favorite episode was the one right before the finale, where they spend most of the episode in Sam's hometown helping his family fix the boat. Like, if I would watch a whole show called Sam and Bucky on a Boat. A lot of the ways they show their friendship are fairly subtle, just because, especially in the beginning, they kind of have that snippy banter back and forth kind of relationship. But I think it's very clear that they respect each other's opinions. There's a lot of we statements like, oh, we're doing this, we're together in on this. And even though a lot of the show is Bucky kind of going along with Sam's ideas, it's not that Sam completely disregards the input from Bucky. The obvious contrast to this would be the relationship between John Walker and Lamar Hoskins. While John clearly cares for Lamar, John is so absorbed into his own issues that he never really shows any support for Lamar or really venerates him until he dies. By contrast, while Bucky is clearly going through his own issues, he still is able to step up and support Sam. Now, up until this point, Sam has been very much a straight man in the Marvel universe. While I would argue Captain America himself serves as the straight man among the Avengers, in his own movie, I think they needed to find someone who was even more of an everyday man compared to Captain America, and so that has kind of been Sam's character function up until this point. And like I mentioned earlier, Sam's arc in Falcon and the Winter Soldier is getting over one of the steps in the hero's journey called the refusal of the call. At the beginning of the show, he gives away the shield, refusing the call to become the next Captain America, and at the end of the show, accepts the title of Captain America. But that summary kind of negates the whole middle part in which he grapples with the idea of what being Captain America would mean as a black man, and that gets to a character I really haven't mentioned at all up to this point, Isaiah. Now, I am actually not super familiar with particularly the older Captain America runs. Other than Steve Rogers as Captain America, I am most familiar with America Chavez as the alternate Captain America. But in the comics, Isaiah is known as the first black Captain America, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier takes on Isaiah's, I would say, his most well-known story, in which he is a successful candidate for the Super Soldier Serum, but instead of venerating him as a hero in the same way Steve Rogers was, Isaiah is taken by the US government and experimented on. Isaiah serves as an interesting foil to Sam in that they have both been betrayed by the US government in some way, but kind of similar to Sharon Carter, Isaiah has given up on the idea of fighting the good fight and being a superhero. But also at the same time, Sam has a fear that he will become like Isaiah and that the US government at some point will turn on him. Isaiah does somewhat feel like a one-off character, like I said, a foil to Sam, but I honestly wouldn't mind seeing him in other stuff. He's a very interesting character. Now on to Baron Zemo. So like I said, you might not remember which movie Zemo was in, and honestly, this role as one of the secondary characters in Falcon and the Winter Soldier honestly elevates him from his role as the main villain in Civil War. And of course, he now gets to be in his comic accurate outfit. Well, modern Zemo comic accurate. I didn't think they were gonna do the original one with the shoulder pads? Blades? Now, I pretty much summarized Sharon Carter's entire arc earlier. She was the straight-laced good guy government agent in both Winter Soldier and Civil War, and now she has made the full turn to anti-hero, maybe villain? Because in the final episode, it is revealed that she is the power broker, this sort of powerful mafia boss, gang leader figure that has been alluded to several times throughout the show. I honestly don't know how to feel about Sharon Carter's turn to being less morally stalwart, just because it was a reveal that happened in the very last episode, and we really haven't seen where they're going to take this yet. All we really know now is now that Sharon Carter has been forgiven by the US government and is now an agent in the US government again. She is going to use her position to sell secrets as the power broker. Now, I also already somewhat summarized John Walker's arc in the story portion as well. John is clearly consumed by inadequacy. Despite all his great achievements, he feels a very heavy burden of fulfilling the mantle of Captain America, of carrying on that legacy. And Lamar kind of has to be the one to kind of juice him up a little bit and be like, yeah, man, like, you're cool, you've done all this, you can do this. And so, of course, when Lamar is killed and John has taken the super soldier serum, he goes completely off the rails, and you have kind of that famous moment of him murdering somebody with the shield. I don't quite remember if that's a specific reference to a moment in the comics, but it is definitely at the very least an homage to some of Captain America's edgier incarnations. Now, they're not really characters in Falcon and the Winter Soldier per se, but I do have to give a shout out to the Dora Milaje. During the midpoint, they mostly serve as an obstacle because they want to re-arrest Zemo, and then towards the end of the series, they serve as a Deus Ex Machina so Sam can get his Captain America suit. But yeah, they come in and they kick ass! My favorite fight scene in the whole series has to be the fight with the Dora Milaje in the apartment. While the fight sequences in general are pretty spectacular, I am definitely a fight sequence kind of person, I felt that a lot of them dragged a little bit, but the fight scene in the apartment with the Dora Milaje definitely was about as long as it needed to be. So Carly Morgenthau is technically our main antagonist. She's kind of in the same position Baron Zemo was in Captain America Civil War, because the conflict in both of those was mainly between the two protagonists in Civil War, between Steve Rogers and Tony Stark, and in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the conflict is more between Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes. So she's kind of our antagonist, but not really our antagonist. Like I said earlier, Sam basically agrees with her principles, but wants to execute them in a more non-violent way, whereas Carly, particularly towards the end of the series, really just wakes up and chooses violence. And she is very much justified in her feelings. I actually really prefer these kind of morally ambiguous Marvel villains that are out fighting for a good cause, as opposed to some of the campier villains that are just out for their own ends. Although sometimes that can make for an entertaining villain. I think they both have their strengths. But yes, that is my review of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I enjoyed the show. I would say I would prefer WandaVision over Falcon and the Winter Soldier personally, but this is definitely a different strokes for different folks type situation. I think quality-wise, the shows are both good. It's just going to be, do you prefer action-adventure over kind of a slow burn mystery? The sun is going down. I actually am on day 2 of filming this review. If you're eagle-eyed, you can probably spot when the day switch happens, because I think my hair is slightly different. But yes, that is it. Let me know what you thought, and I will see you next time.